What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Action Network podcast presented by BetMGM. I'm your host, Chris Raybon of the Action Network, and this is our NFL off-season update pod. We're going to look at a few storylines in the NFL before the upcoming draft. Obviously, free agency will be the big theme of this episode, and weekly episodes covering all things NFL draft start again this Monday. For today's episode, I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Sean Kerner, Action Network's Director of Predictive Analytics and one of the top player projectionists in the world. Sean, what's going on?
What's up? Welcome back. This is just always a hectic time of year. Right now, we both have a couple weeks off after NFL. And now I'm all in on college basketball, gearing up for March Madness, getting ready for baseball. I saw you were doing some baseball spring training bets, things like that. So, and then in the meantime, everyone in the NFL is on different teams. So it's always fun to just see the pure chaos of the first couple of days of free agency. But I feel like this year, it's even more so, or it's even more insane. So it's been fun to see.
Yeah, we have a lot to talk about. So we'll get into NFL free agency. We'll talk just kind of teams, who has the most to gain and lose. We'll talk players, some kind of prognostication for the upcoming fantasy season, things, free agency as it relates to futures, just anything that might be of relevance in this free agency period. We're going to talk about it, so we're going to jump right in. But before we get started, a quick heads up. The great state of North Carolina officially launched sports betting this week. So if you're in the Tar Heel state, take advantage of the best sign-up offers across every sports book. You can find a link to every one of those offers in the description of this episode. All the North Carolina offers all in one place. Just check out the link in the episode description. North Cackalack finally on board. Man, I remember that. Remember Petey Pablo, Sean? And did that ring a bell? Or
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, man. That used to be my joint, man. North Carolina. But let's. I digress. Let's get before we because we're gonna cover a lot. So I want to kind of set this up. The salary cap increased, Sean, record rate for this season, up nearly 14% from just under $225 million to just over $255 million. Now, teams have been budgeting for about 10 to 15 million less than the salary cap actually is. So just any quick thoughts on how that's kind of impacting what teams are doing and just the general impact on the league.
Yeah, I think, it'll maybe allow more dynasty type teams like the Chiefs, for example. Mahomes, he's beyond his rookie contract, obviously. He's taken a $59 million hit on their cap this year. So the increased salary cap allowed them to, re-sign Chris Jones to that massive deal. So a team like the Chiefs, they're clear in win-now mode with Mahomes in his prime. And while they still have Andy Reid as a head coach and Travis Kelce still playing, so I think it's allowing the Chiefs to really increase their chances of a three-peat with this and being able to bring on Jones. It's made free agency already more interesting, and we're going to see players sign for bigger deals than expected. So you can't really compare these contracts to what we're kind of used to. So you kind of have to factor that in. But it could allow for some steals later on too. Who knows? But plus, the franchise tags are higher, so it allowed the Bears, to avoid doing that with Jalen Johnson. I think they got a pretty good deal on him. He's a shutdown corner where, both sides are happy. So it's kind of nice. I think, a lot of the players I feel like are underpaid. So I think this is just a really positive thing for the league. And it's made the first couple of days of free agency that much more exciting. So overall, I think it's a great move.
Yeah. The only thing is it just throws those contract is worth up to even more out of whack now. Cause how they never report the true figures and the outs at first. You just see these big numbers, but
maybe more incentives for week 18.
Right. Yeah. That's I'm already looking toward week 18 in mid-March. But I totally agree with you. I think really helps the rich get richer because, as you kind of mentioned with Kansas City, you can keep more high cap studs together. And while you would think, okay, higher salary cap, the teams with a lot of cap space are going to have even more, but most of the best players are already under contract. So I think what it really does is help these teams kind of keep those guys together. Think about a team like San Francisco that's already operating with a cheaper quarterback than most, and they have all those studs everywhere else. That helps them. The Chiefs, as you mentioned, and kind of any team like you mentioned the Chiefs. I think a team like the Bengals, any team that doesn't have a quarterback on a rookie deal anymore, it actually helps those because you do have like a CJ Stroud and the Texans. They're coming for some of these other teams, but now these teams that have already had to pay their quarterbacks, they have a little bit more flexibility, and you're even seeing that with it's easier to carry franchise tag players into the new league here and like not force or rush a trade. So that's why you're seeing, I think, like the Bengals still holding on to T. Higgins. They can kind of afford. They're afforded more leeway and can kind of hold out for the best deal. So that's kind of what I think is going on here. And I think the running back market too, like it made teams a little bit more comfortable spending on running backs, and that's why pretty much every running back that was a free agent already got signed, and we'll spend a good chunk of the pod kind of talking about those guys, especially as it pertains to fantasy, because I know you guys are going to be interested in that. But let's start out with some more general overview team talk first. Which team do you think, or team or teams do you think have the most to gain or lose, or already has gained or lost the most in this free agency period?
Well, it's got to be the Commanders for me because they had almost $100 million in cap space, which is the most in the league. And they have the number 2 pick. I'm assuming they're going to take quarterback like Drake May or Jaden Daniels. So they're going to have to be smart how they start this rebuild. They just can't throw money around like the Pats did a couple years ago, that like Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry signing, like just throwing money at guys just because they could. They got to be smart about it. And they've already signed a ton of players. And every signing seemed pretty fair to me. I guess the only questionable one may have been the Mariota. But it seems like every 5 to 10 minutes they're signing someone new. So they're going to be adding a ton of players. And I think, adding guys like Zach Ertz and Austin Eckler, they're past their prime, I would say. But they could be, pretty good safety valves for a rookie quarterback and help him develop. So far, so good, especially on the defensive side with the rebuild here. But just because they have a ton of money doesn't mean they're going to be smart with it. But, with all these, free agents signing on the first couple of days, I thought so far they've done a pretty good job. So I think they have the most to gain just based on how much cap space they do have right now.
Yeah, that team is going to look a lot different. I think they're wishing they could have, or they could get more for Sam Howell. It sounds like he's not going to get anything more than like I think like a 4th rounder. I think they were saying maybe a 3rd, but they're having sounds like they're having a little bit of trouble dealing him because, as you mentioned, they're going to take a rookie, and Mariota seems like he's going to be the backup now. So I mean, good idea. I think Mariota, quality backup, can move around. So I like him as a backup, but got to see what they're going to end up doing with Howell. That will kind of really shape this roster. But yeah, they've been all over the place. I mean, they like, they have a mix of veterans, young guys, but I agree. I think it is kind of like a make or break free agency period, because if you hit on that quarterback, we saw it with the Texans, you can kind of fast track yourself back into contention. So really important offseason, I think, for Washington, sitting pretty with that draft pick. For me, I got to go with the Houston Texans because they already have the quarterback to join the short list of AFC contenders. Last year, they made the playoffs in year 1 under CJ Stroud. The roster was kind of just pieced together with, a lot of young guys and some veterans to kind of plug some holes. But they have 5 picks in the top 127. They're top 8 in cap space. They've already added a bunch of guys on defense, like the Danico Autry signing. They signed Fadukasi. Like, there's just a lot of guys to kind of fortify that defense, but they still have a lot of cap space to play with. And I think this roster, it's pretty solid. It's a high floor roster, but I think it needs more needle movers, right? Like, offensive line, you have Tunsil. He's amazing. Shaq Mason is pretty good on the interior, but everyone else, I think you could stand to upgrade. So I'd like to see them maybe take like a shot at some value guys in on the interior, like a Connor Williams or a Kevin Zeitler, maybe a Glowinski or a Gates, and Trent Brown, Tyron Smith, Charles Leno, Mekhi Becton are available at tackle most likely. So I'd like to see them do something there. On the defensive line, they have Anderson. That was a top 3 pick. They added Autry, but he's 34. I think the deal was pretty solid, 2 years, 20 mil, but I would like to see them. They still have cap space to add like another premium guy. Like, I would love to see them get like a Danielle Hunter or a Chase Young, or if you're going a little more, kind of like the one and done, maybe a Clowney or a Calais Campbell. But Armstead was recently released from San Francisco. He's a D'Amico Ryans guy, so maybe he goes there. But I think they could stand to add somebody on the defensive line. Same thing at corner. You have a top 10 corner in Stingley. You have a good bargain in Des King. You signed a reclamation project in Okuda, former top 5 pick. But I think they could stand to sign like maybe a Gilmore, a Fuller, somebody like that. And safety, kind of the same thing, like Jimmy Ward, 33 years old. He's very good, but Petrie's been kind of middling, maybe better near the line of scrimmage. So maybe you add a CJ Gardner-Johnson or somebody like that. Like, there's a lot of possibilities, but I would just like to see the Texans add like a couple more like high quality veterans. And I think this roster will be right there. Kind of like the Bengals, what was it, year 2, right? They went to the Super Bowl with Burrow. Was that, or year 3? Like, I think this Texans team, it's not going to be the best defense in the league, but I think you add a few more guys to what you already have, and I think it could be above average, and I think the offense could be elite if you add, and you're also going to obviously add guys in the draft, but if you add maybe another couple of like cheap starters on the interior, maybe a swing tackle, because keeping CJ Stroud upright is going to be paramount. So I think the Texans really have a lot to gain, because if they do, last year, I mean, they made it to the second round. If they do it right this year, they could be right there with like the Bills, the Bengals, the Ravens, trying to bid for that AFC Championship date to with probably Mahomes. Let's be serious. So Texans definitely for me.
And you like the Dalton Schultz 3-year deal? Making sure
I don't mind it. I don't mind it because he's obviously not an elite tight end like like a Kelsey or somebody like that, but he's a very solid tight end. Has some decent route running ability, and I think in this offense he complements them well and seem to have a good relationship with Stroud. So I like that. The skill players for the Texans are fine. I would like to see them add like somebody with more juice, and like a Jalen Wright in the draft or somebody like that. Like, I just want some speed. Like another Tank Dell, but maybe at running back this time, since you only got Mixon and Pierce.
Yeah, I mean, admittedly, I was probably a little too low on Schultz this year. I thought he was great, but I think giving Stroud some continuity, like at the tight end position, makes sense. I also I wonder if they're going to bring back Derek Barnett if they can get him cheap, because he was kind of a disappointment in Philadelphia, but like he played 6-7 games with the Texans at the end there, and he really broke out. So I would hope that they would bring him back if they can get him cheap. But he really stepped up when Will Anderson was kind of banged up. He was one of their key guys on the edge, so he'd be an interesting guy for them to bring back as well.
Yeah, and it seems like D'Amico Ryans is getting the most out of these guys on defense. Like, a lot of guys that weren't great before he came, like parlayed that into big contracts. Like Blake Cashman got a big contract at linebacker. Desmond King came out of nowhere and was giving them quality snaps at corner late in the year. So there could be some under the radar guys that they signed for cheap that they could get a lot of production out of. All right, what about teams that have the most to lose or have lost the most in free agency?
Well, I think the team with the most to lose would be the Ravens, possibly. They may lose a couple offensive linemen. They already lost left guard John Simpson. He signed with the Jets.
Mm-hmm.
Probably going to lose Kevin Zeitler, their right
Mm-hmm.
guard. They lost Gus Edwards, potentially losing J.K. Dobbins and Dalvin Cook. But, they brought in Derrick Henry. So that could fix that, and that's probably what they should do. They only ran the ball 6 times against the Chiefs and lost. So
Don't
maybe
remind me.
this will correct that. I know, too soon. I know, but that should help. So I thought that was a good move. We'll talk more about him later, but I think Keaton Mitchell, maybe he's not ready for Week 1, but I think he's going to be a great compliment for Henry there. Odell Beckham. It sounds like they might re-sign him. I don't know if that's really key in this offense, but on the defensive side, they could use quite a few players. They already lost Patrick Queen, who signed with the Steelers. Certainly, this is nothing that they can't overcome. I still think they're going to be a contender, but they're probably going to have to make a lot of moves in free agency and the draft to kind of just make up some of these big losses that they're going to have.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of a testament to how stacked their roster is that even with losing all these guys, the roster still looks pretty good, at least the starters. Obviously, they could have some depth issues, but I do think, they need to think they got decent snaps out of guys like Darby and Rock Ya-Sin, like all these cornerbacks. So they're probably going to lose those guys. So they need to make sure that cornerback depth is there, because in the AFC, you got all these quarterbacks. But even with losing Queen, I mean, you still got Roquan Smith there. Harrison played well last year too, so he's probably going to step in. So yeah, they just keep on churning. They'll probably win a ton of preseason games, all the preseason.
Oh yeah, all the preseason games.
But yeah, no, the Ravens were definitely on my radar. The Bills were another team that lost a lot of guys. But for me, it's the Dolphins, because they lost some really high quality players that I just don't know if they're going to be able to replace in, at least this season. Guys like Robert Hunt, he was like a top 6, graded out as a top 6 tackle, got $100 million deal with Carolina. Christian Wilkins, one of the better interior linemen in the game, he signed a big deal. Van Ginkel, graded out as a top 10 edge rusher last year, he's gone. Brandon Jones was a top 16 safety, he's gone. You also lost Jerome Baker, Xavier Howard, Emmanuel Agba. And now you did add a couple of linebackers in Walker, Jordan Brooks, and you kind of bought low on Shaq Barrett. But overall, you have 2 picks in the first 5 rounds. You have number 21 overall, you have number 55 overall, and then you have nothing till round 5. So I think this is, especially when you consider you also lost Vic Fangio, just a lot of guys to lose on the defense. And also, given how important, keeping Tua upright is, and kind of preventing some of that interior pressure so he can see over the middle of the field, I think that Hunt loss is big as well. So we saw that kind of last year with the Dolphins defense deteriorating due to injury. And now it seems like the same thing happened, except it's free agency this time instead of all the injuries. So just I'm a little concerned about the Dolphins defense, and a little concerned about that loss of Hunt on the line as well.
Yeah, and I mean, they have one of the best wide receiver duos in the league, but they don't really have a number 3 receiver, so they can never really afford Tyreek or Waddle to miss time. I do think somehow they need to get a better number 3 receiver. It's not a glaring need, but that's just something in season that would certainly help.
Yeah, and they did sign Jonnu Smith, so maybe they get more. Finally, the tight end is involved, but I mean, he's not a great run blocker. So, and Mostert's great season last year, but he's a year older. So yeah, this Dolphin team, I mean, great coach, great top end talent with Tyreek and Ramsey and Tua and Achane. But man, if this team starts going through some injuries like they did last year, and then they have to end up going on a road into a cold weather game in the AFC, which is likely just because of how many good teams there are, I would still worry about this Dolphin team, especially with limited with draft capital. But let's jump into the players, and we'll go quarterback, running back, wide receiver. We'll start with quarterback. The big one was Kirk Cousins to the Atlanta Falcons. 4 years, $180 million, $100 million guaranteed for a soon-to-be 36-year-old coming off an Achilles with no Justin Jefferson. Like, I don't know. Like, Cousins is one of the, like, I would say Cousins is, he is a top 12 quarterback in this league, I think. But, I mean, what is this? Like, am I missing something with this $100 million guaranteed? Like, is the Achilles just a non-issue? Like, what are you thinking here with Cousins?
Yeah, I mean, well, it helps that he's a pocket passer, so even if he's not 100%, it probably shouldn't impact him too much. But I agree, this is probably way too much for, like you said, he is above average, but probably not going to make them a Super Bowl contender. I think in terms of fantasy, this is probably a downgrade from him. I mean, he's going from having the best receiver in the game, a really talented second-year receiver in Jordan Addison, and one of the best tight ends in T.J. Hawkinson. However, I do love this for the three guys we've been dying to be more fantasy relevant. I do love this to potentially unlock the fantasy upside. Bijan Robinson, Drake London, and Kyle Pitts, especially, since Arthur Smith is gone. This coaching tree is, from the Rams. So I think it's going to be more pass heavy, should fit into Kirk Cousins' strengths. So I do like this, and for fantasy purposes, for their skill players. But yeah, this certainly probably is a downgrade for Cousins in terms of surrounding talent. But again, I do like this potentially unlocking Bijan, London, and Pitts here.
Any thoughts on the recovery from the Achilles in particular? Because I struggle with it just because it's one of those things where there's such a small sample size of guys who have even torn their Achilles. And then, now obviously the medicine's improving, but like even when it comes to quarterbacks, I mean, besides Aaron Rodgers, who we don't know how he'll, return, I couldn't even find a quarterback that's torn their Achilles since like Dan Marino in 9-3. Yeah, like wow. He came back in 9-4 and he was fine. But just any thoughts? Like, just $100 million guaranteed seemed hefty for a mid-30s guy coming off an Achilles.
Well, I mean, I'm not a doctor, but I did say it a whole lot. But it depends on the position. Like, we know for running back, it's almost a death sentence because that's such a critical body part for running back. Whereas, if a running back were to tear their right labrum or something, it's not as big deal for a quarterback. But that's interesting. I didn't know that there hasn't been that many instances of torn Achilles. But again, like I said, I think just the fact that Kirk Cousins is a pocket passer. I mean, he doesn't scramble much. He doesn't get outside of the pocket that much either. I just see it not being as big of a deal. Now I'm trying to remember. So he tore it in week 8. Yeah. So that does give him some buffer. Like if he tore it in the playoffs, that would probably be more of a concern. So I think he tore it early enough in the season where he could potentially be closer to 100% by week 1. But this is something where, maybe it's going to impact his ability to, be in the off-season programs and get chemistry with his new team. That could be the issue, really, as opposed to like him being fully healthy by week 1. I think it could just kind of stunt, the chemistry forms with his teammates, and maybe they start off a little bit slower as a result, and maybe it takes a few games to get there. So that's where I see it could potentially be a concern for sure.
Yeah, and speaking of the new teammates, you also got Darnell Mooney from Chicago, 3 years, $39 million, $26 million guaranteed. So I mean, Atlanta threw a lot of money at this passing game. It's either going to go well, but I could see a situation where it goes poorly too if Cousins, like you said, not quite there with the chemistry, and maybe the injury affects the deep ball a little bit and things like that, but. I guess that's why you have Bijan Robinson if push comes to shove. But yeah, I'm like Cousins. I haven't really. I'm gonna continue to monitor him in the offseason. Like I don't really have a flag to plant on Cousins yet because I'm intrigued. But I also think there's like a lower floor than this like 4-year, $180 million, $100 million guaranteed contract is suggesting as well. So this is one I'm going to keep a close eye on. Russell Wilson to Pittsburgh for I mean, Denver's essentially paying his entire salary. I think
Yep.
he's getting like $1 million from Pittsburgh and 38 from Denver. So this pretty much just guarantees another year of mediocrity for the Steelers, right?
Most likely. I mean, they're not risking too much. Like you said, Denver's on the hook for most of this. They're only paying $1 million. Maybe it lights a fire under Kenny Pickett's ass and he finally breaks out. You know, at times Russ Wilson did look fine last season. I don't think it's entirely all his fault. So I think that, you know, he could unlock, you know, George Pickens has massive upside with him. We saw, you know, Cortland Sutton last year have a really good season with Russell Wilson. So there's enough pass catching talent around him. I think he could be fine. And, you know, I don't think Kenny Pickett has progressed enough to really think that he's the answer going forward. So does this make them Super Bowl contenders? Probably not. But the fact that they're only paying him $1.2 million this year, might as well try it out. We'll see how it goes. But, you know, there's a chance he can get some of his form from Seattle back here. I don't think it's likely, but it just seems like a low risk signing at least.
Oh yeah, the value is great. Like anytime you can get like a quarterback, and I think at this stage of his career he's more below average. Like I think like the numbers at times he had decent numbers last year. That was Sean Payton really putting on a masterclass and kind of hiding him, and he still ended up getting exposed. But I just think he has real issues when it comes to reading coverages, and at this point, even his pocket like presence it's just not there.
He takes too many like awful sacks.
Yeah, he just not seeing the field or processing quickly enough. It's like he looks deep and then he like looks like to check down or he looks to run. It's just there's nothing in between. And with Arthur Smith, I mean, this could be a disaster. Like, let's be honest. Like, this is Arthur Smith, Russell Wilson in Pittsburgh, a whole nother fan base that's not going to tolerate his brand of terribleness. I mean, it's a great value, sure. But I can also just see, like, I'm not moved by it. And you also got all these like spicy receivers that just like will just pop off if they're not happy. So like this, I can see this not go. I can see Russell Wilson getting cut by like week 5, honestly. Like it's
that's in the range of outcomes. We might have to have a side bet prop on that for sure.
Yeah. Because like I mean, Sean Payton, Arthur Smith, Sean Payton masterclass in that midseason when the Broncos were playing well. But I just, man, it's so weird because it's such a good value for a quarterback, but I still don't. I still see the Steelers maxing out at like 9-10 wins, and that's mostly to do with their defense. But let's get into the fun stuff. Running back. Yeah. I think we've always been kind of dreaming about this, and it happened. Derrick Henry
finally
to the Ravens, and 2 years, $20 million. Sounds like it's about half of that is guaranteed. Entering his age 30 season now. Like I'm gonna say this, and I want to get your thoughts, but I'm gonna say this about Derrick Henry. Anytime 27 or later, running backs always going to be at risk for that just fall off a cliff type of situation. However, just from what we've seen to date from Derrick Henry, he's still Derrick Henry. The biggest thing that's been wrong the last 3 years, because I know his numbers have been a little bit more down compared to his career. For example, last year, Tennessee's offensive line, 31st in yards before contact. Under a yard, 0.84 to be exact. Baltimore, top 3 in the league. So you go from a bottom 3 to a top 3. Now, let's look at some of Derrick Henry's other metrics. In yards after contact, 3.3. That's 12th of 63 running backs. And that's anytime you're getting over 3, that's elite pretty much.
Yeah.
So 3.3 is amazing. For context, Gus Edwards, 2.7. That's over a half a yard less per carry. And you look at missed tackles per carry, 0.2 for Henry in 2023. That's actually above his 0.189 career mark. So that he didn't fall off in that sense. Okay, let's look at, because obviously, like, I thought he passed the eye test, but let's take like a PFF grade, see how they looked at it. 90.2 PFF grade, number 3 in the entire National Football League. Yards per route run was above his career average last year, and higher than Gus Edwards is as well, since that's the guy that you figure that's the role he's gonna take over. So to me, I know he could just like fall off all at once, but as of now, I don't really think we've seen even as much of a fall off as some people are like suggesting, just because like his raw numbers have fallen off. I look at it as almost totally due to that Titans O line, and that's why I think his yards per contact and his grades and all that have stayed, and his missed tackles have stayed pretty stable and consistent. But what have you seen with Henry?
Yeah, like every year, I feel like heading into the season, we do kind of discuss if and when Derrick Henry will decline, and like we saw it last year with like Dalvin Cook, for example. I mean, just think of how good he was just a couple years ago, and then last year, I mean, he was barely a functioning running back. Same thing with Austin Eckler. I mean, he did fall off quite a bit. It just happens at this age, but Derrick Henry showed no signs last year whatsoever of slowing down. And like you keep prefacing, it could happen this year, but we have no reason to really think that. And, he's a different type of back. Like he's a massive back, big presence. He still had the speed. So there just hasn't really been signs. Maybe he's the type of back he is. He'll slow down a little bit slower than some of these other guys. So I think this is just a really good landing spot for him. He's going to be the workhorse back on a high scoring team. I think this enhances his touchdown upside. And, Lamar Jackson's a rushing quarterback but when they get in the red zone, it's not like he's stealing touchdowns in the same way Jalen Hurts does. So, Derrick Henry's going to be the goal line back. And I don't really think he's going to be competing with Lamar Jackson in that sense. So I think he has a ton of upside, and he's going to be his usual, high-end RB1 self this year. So I'm not really, calling for him to regress that much this year. I think it's a great landing spot. And what you said about the offensive line change is massive as well. That could help offset any potential decline he has, is just better blocking. So I love this landing spot. I still think he's going to be a hand RB1 in this offense this year.
Yeah, and not just the offensive line and the offense should give him more touchdown equity, but we know how difficult it is for a defense when it's like a read option and you have to choose between going after Lamar or going after Derrick Henry, because even if you go after Henry, you're not guaranteed to bring him down. That's the whole issue. And I think this is going to be great. And again, like he's a significant upgrade over Gus Edwards, who was highly efficient in that Raven offense throughout his career. So I'm cautiously optimistic here. I think what will probably happen when Henry finally slows down, it'll probably be an injury. And then he'll just struggle to come back from it. Because even Eckler last year, I mean, I think he got injured after, like, he played the first game and then missed a ton, if I'm not mistaken.
It's like a high ankle sprain. He was going through something pretty significant. Yeah.
Right. So I think that's what it will probably end up being with him. But as of now, as long as he's healthy and enters the season healthy, I mean, this is a great move for Baltimore. They didn't add much, but that's quite the add. For the Ravens. So is Henry still a like a top 10 fantasy running back for you, or like where do you
running back or overall pick?
It's kind of the same thing almost.
I would say, yeah. I mean, I don't really do initial projections until the draft. Yeah. But yeah, he's absolutely a top 10 running back. Probably at the end of round 1. Off the top of my head, I think that he should be around that turn. What about you?
Yeah, same thing. Like the age is concerning. So but at the same time, there's only so many running backs that are doing what he's doing, and putting up the kind of underlying metrics and have that kind of offensive line. And it's going to be still a fairly run heavy offense, even though they switched to
plenty of leading game scripts.
Yeah,
that's always the thing with him, is he's not a great pass catching back, or maybe he is. We don't know, but they just never really threw to him that much in Tennessee. So. The fact that we don't have to worry as many trailing game scripts will help him as well.
Yeah, and it's gonna help the Ravens too, because they just play with their food every time they get a lead. I mean, it's ridiculous. Like so many these last few years, just so many blown leads. Or I mean, go back to that playoff game when you're just not handing the ball off.
Yeah.
Like if you're not handing the ball off to Derrick Henry, you got issues.
Exactly.
And so another really fascinating one. Not my favorite as a Giants fan, but Saquon Barkley to the Philadelphia Eagles, 3 years. $37.8 million, $26 million guaranteed. This is his age 27 season. This is the largest contract Howie Roseman has handed to a running back since with Sean McCoy's $45 million extension in 2012. So what are you thinking? Like, what are your thoughts? Like first thoughts when you think of Barkley on the Eagles?
Yeah, that was a crazy signing inside the same division. I mean, it's a great move. He's still pretty much in his prime at 27. I'd still consider him, maybe a top 5 back, top 3 back, still one of the best backs in the league. So could thrive on a team like the Eagles, who have a much better offensive line than he's used to. However, I kind of mentioned it. Jalen Hurts is going to continue to get all those like goal line touchdowns. So that's going to cap his upside a bit. But he's going to be much more efficient in this offense. Maybe not as involved as a pass catcher as well. Jalen Hurts is more likely to pull the down run than, check down. So I think he's going to be more efficient, but maybe less touchdown equity and less pass catching upside. But it's a great move for the Eagles. I think one of the things they did struggle with last year was just the running game. So I think that, having like a stud like Barkley should help. I was kind of hoping, to be honest, like the better landing spots for Barkley would have been like the Texans or Chargers in terms of fantasy value. So this isn't really a great move for his fantasy value. But like in real life terms, I think this was a pretty good move for the Eagles, because I think he's worth it. He's one of those backs where, again, he's still in his prime. I think they're going to get a few good years out of him. So I thought it was a pretty good signing by the Eagles.
Yeah, this is a real departure from Howie Roseman, who, we were kind of giving him props for like cobbling together the cheapest backfield ever. Last year, it was like you had Swift, you had Penny, who they didn't even need.
Yeah, too bad they didn't try Penny out.
Right. Gainwell is cheap, rookie deal. Boston Scott obviously is cheap. Didn't really play either. But I do think, number one, like I always like to kind of look at, okay, well, what is the thought process here? I think that the Barkley is a clear upgrade on Swift in a number of areas. His yards after contact, 2.9 last year to 2.4 for Swift. That's right around their career averages as well. Pass protection, Barkley had a 76.6 grade from PFF. Swift 47.9. So more likely to be like a 3-down back is Barkley than Swift was. And then Barkley has shown that ability, averaging 20.1 touches per game in 2023 and 20.6 for his career. Swift 16.8 last year, 14.1 for his career. So Barkley, I think there's what this move did. It kind of just widened his range of outcomes. Right, he was still a top 10 back in points per game last year in PPR and half PPR. But what this did is like I think the high end is like a poor man's Christian McCaffrey. Because like they might just say, hey, 26 mil guaranteed. Let's get those 2 years out of him and let's try to win the Super Bowl here. And you know how like the Niners were always kind of using all these committee backs with Shanahan, and then they get McCaffrey and he just doesn't come off the field. I could see that on the ceiling for Barkley is that same role. And then I think the floor is DeAndre Swift's usage from last year, but that's less likely. So I don't think it actually knocks him too much, because even the touchdowns are what I'm most concerned with. But I went back and looked, and so Barkley's was obviously getting almost all of the share of Giants carries when they got in scoring position, right? But being on a bad offense really hurts, because last year Barkley did have 10 touchdowns, 6 rushing, but averaged just 1.1 carries per game inside the 10 and 0.4 carries per game inside the 5. Now, DeAndre Swift, getting only a 40% share, averaged 1.7 carries per game inside the 10. So over a half a carry more per game than Barkley, and then 0.6 inside the 5 to Barkley's 0.4. So even though Swift was getting pretty much half the share that Barkley did of his team's attempts in scoring position, because that Eagle offense was more efficient, he can still get more opportunities. Now he's got to convert those, so there's still a wide range of outcomes, but it's not like a given necessarily that Barkley that his touchdown equity suffers. Like he could still, especially if the Eagles offense improves, because they actually had a pretty shaky year last year. So overall, I don't hate the move. I think Barkley's still a top 12 back. I'm not really buying this whole, like, I know they're talking about like thunder and lightning. I don't think you give a guy 26 mil at age 27 to like, you know, put him in a committee. I think they got this guy to be like the answer to McCaffrey in San Francisco for the Eagles. So I think, you know, you're always going to have that elevated durability risk when you have a back, you know, past his mid-20s, but I don't hate it, because the O-line, you're going from bottom 3 O-line to which should still be above average one, even with Kelsey gone. All right, Josh Jacobs to the Packers, 4 years, 48 mil. I saw one report that said guaranteed was only 12.5 mil. I don't know if I've seen that confirmed, but either way, you know, Jacobs signed to a multi-year deal. He's 26. What are your thoughts on Jacobs going from Vegas to Green Bay? And Aaron Jones, obviously, we'll talk about him, but he moves on. So what are your thoughts as Jacobs as the RB1 in Green Bay?
No, I love this landing spot for him, especially with the Packers just moving on from Aaron Jones, likely moving on from A.J. Dillon. So he could have very little competition for touches on a team on the rise. Like, I'm pretty high on the Packers going into the season. You know, Jordan Love really came on towards the end. I think he's going to be even better this year with more chemistry with his, you know, they were inexperienced last year, but he has a really good receiving core, I think, heading into year 2. So I love his upside here. This is also good news potentially for Zamir White, who could enter the 2024 season as the Raiders lead back. He impressed at the end of last year. So still time for them to sign draft people, but I thought this was a positive move for Josh Jacobs' fantasy value. Could be, you know, I think he'll be at least a low-end RB1, but he could have similar upside he had a couple years ago on the Raiders, you know, when he had nearly 400 touches. Last year, I don't think he cracked 300 touches, so that's kind of nice knowing that he didn't get as much tread on the tires last year. And he's still only 26, so he's pretty much, you know, at the tail end of his prime, I would say, for running back. So I think he has a few good years left in him, and I think this is a great landing spot for him in terms of fantasy.
Yeah, I'm probably lower than than you and just the consensus on Jacobs here. For one reason, and that's I think there's some uncertainty as far as is Jacobs already starting to fall off that cliff? Because even though like let's compare him to Aaron Jones, for example. Aaron Jones entering his age 30 season has about 50 more career touches than Josh Jacobs. So Josh Jacobs is still averaging over 300 touches a year for his career. And last season, his yards after contact, which for running backs is stickier than yards before contact, which is more of an offensive line stat. It was a career low 2.4. Now his career rate is 3.0. So that's a pretty big drop off. And then if you just look at across the board in terms of his pass blocking, his receiving, like everything was at a career low grade in PFF. So there's a chance that like all this heavy workload is already starting to take its toll. And the reason that concerns me a little bit, like obviously he's going to get, he's going to be that top running back in Green Bay, but Matt LaFleur with the Packers never had a running back average more than 17.8 touches per game. Now you did have Aaron Jones average 22.5 over, the last 3 regular season and 2 playoff games, but like for a full season, he's never really ridden a running back, to the extent that Jacobs was ridden even last year when he averaged 20.8 touches per game. And then in that top 5 season the year before, he averaged 23 touches per game. So like he needed almost 21 touches a game last year just to be like a RB 17, 18. Now you would think that this Green Bay offense is better than being on that Raider offense with Aiden O'Connell and Hoyer and Jimmy G, but the Raiders and Packers backfields actually had the same exact amount of fantasy value. They were both right around 26, 27 in terms of PPR and half PPR points. So like there's a chance if Jacobs is like inefficient and isn't like what he was in 2022, that it's just the Jordan Love show, because that's what kind of happened last year where it was just Jordan Love and those pass catchers. And like Jones came on near the end, but I just think there is some kind of unseen downside risk with Jacobs. So I'm gonna still be drafting him as more like mid-range RB2. I do think you and you're right that consensus will have him as a low on RB1. But I just see a few different warning signs with Jacobs and Aaron Jones a lot more efficient even at this stage of his career than Jacobs ever has been. So yeah, I'm tempering expectations a little bit. I'm interested to see if like what Green Bay does with that RB2 spot. Is it Emmanuel Wilson? Do they draft somebody? Do they sign like a cheap free agent? That'll be interesting, but I'm not completely in on Jacobs yet. Tony Pollard. Speaking of a guy, we wanted to be in on him last year. Thought he was gonna do his thing in Dallas, and it was kind of like super mid, pretty frustrating, honestly. But he got a 3-year, $24 million deal from the Tennessee Titans. Of course, they got Callahan coming over from Cincy as the new coach. Pollard, it just seemed like the being like a bell cow or a feature back took its toll on him last year. But what did you see with him?
Yeah, I mean, so last year maybe he proved that he can't be a workhorse back. Maybe it was due to just his ankle injury. He had that tightrope procedure, which can allow running backs to struggle the following season. So that could have been part of that. I thought it was kind of a weird signing. I like Tajay Spears a lot, but I don't know if he could be a workhorse back either. I think both these backs are very similar, so they might complement each other pretty well. And this could actually turn out to be more of a 50-50 committee than people realize.
Yes.
So I think that would actually be good for the Titans to have both backs healthy, keep them fresh. They're both explosive. So I think Pollard might be a bit overrated in that regard, and Spears might be, a value, especially if Pollard struggles continue this year, which I don't think they will. I think part of it was due to his late season injury the previous season, but yeah, I thought it was kind of a weird signing. I don't know if this is a great landing spot either. They really need to keep building the offensive line. Their offensive line is an issue. So I don't know if he can overcome that, but I might be drafting Spears in those later rounds to kind of be his, the anti-fragile backup here.
Yeah, because first of all, who knows what's going to happen at quarterback? So you're going from Dallas, who's putting up, guaranteed 30 every time they're at home, to this Titan team that might take like 3-4 games to put up 30 points. Yeah. The offensive line's still not great. They threw a lot of money at Cushenberry, but like, did he just improve because it was a contract year, or did he finally realize his potential? I don't know. So yeah, a lot of concerns, and like you said, Tajay Spears may just be the better back, and Pollard is 27 now. 2019 to 2022, his first 4 years, 3.8 yards per contact. 2023, 2.9. Was it the ankle? Was it the workload? Was it the age? Was it a combination? He was just never meant to get like 250 plus touches in a year. So a lot of red flags with Pollard. I agree with you there. Austin Eckler to Washington, 2 years, 11.4 mil, age 29 season for him. He's been, the thing I've noticed about him is like, yes, I think the injury contributed to the career worst year, but last 6 years, yards after contact, starting from 6 years ago, 3.4, 3.2, 3.1, 3.0, 2.9, 2.6. So he's been dropping for the last 6 years in that. And then yards per route run, which we know is kind of his calling card, last 5 years, 2.7, 1.7, 1.6, 1.6, 1.3. So he's been trending down in some key metrics. He's 29. He's on a new team. I guess he's going to get that Gibson role. How are you valuing him?
Yeah. Like you said, he's really starting to show signs of decline. He's 29. Who knows how much of that decline last year was due to, again, I think it was a high ankle sprain he was playing through. So kudos to him playing through that. But maybe that was why his production was down. His touchdown production took a hit. He only had 6 total touchdowns last year. Washington's offense will probably provide him with fewer short yardage touchdowns this year. So that's a concern. Like you said, Antonio Gibson's off to the Patriots, so they need a pass catching back. He'll certainly fill that role. And, he's going to be a good safety valve for a rookie quarterback. So I think it's important to have a veteran pass catching back like him. They still have Brian Robinson and Chris Rodriguez, who I thought was solid last year. So, they're going to mix in on early down work. That would be one way they can limit his workload. So I don't think he's going to be like a true workhorse back. If anything, maybe he'll be in on the goal line, dominate passing down work. I view him as more of an RB2 right now than, the top 5 pick that we've seen the past few seasons. So I think I don't love this landing spot for a declining player at a position where he's definitely, past his peak. So yeah, I think heading into this season, he's going to see a bit of a downgrade in my projections.
Yeah, and the average salary under $6 million. I mean, that says volumes because even Aaron Jones, I believe, got $7 million. Like Swift, who let's talk about Swift.
Yeah.
Now he got about $8 million a year, 3 years, $24 million. I guess my concern with him is that Khalil Herbert averages 3.2 yards after contact for his career, whereas Swift's at 2.5. And then Roschon Johnson is a much better pass blocker than Swift. So this is another situation where I'm a little worried about how the workload shakes out. But what are your thoughts on Swift to the Bears?
Yeah, so I'm a big Khalil Herbert believer. I think he's talented, underrated. They could have rolled with him, being the lead back in a committee with Roschon Johnson, who I think is pretty solid, could be a little bit better in year 2. So I thought this was a poor signing. I don't think Swift moves the needle much for me. Still might end up being in a 3-way committee with these 2 backs. Mm-hmm. But, he's had durability issues. He was healthy for most of last season, but he just doesn't seem like a guy that deserves this type of money, especially since, Aaron Jones signed for, $7 million 1 year. I thought that was a better deal. Didn't like this signing. And again, I don't think this necessarily means Khalil Herbert's out of the water yet. Like, I think he could still mix in quite a bit in this offense. So didn't love this signing. And I didn't like the landing spot for Swift either.
Yeah. My thoughts exactly. You mentioned Aaron Jones, 1 year, $7 million, age 30 year. I guess we don't have to spend too much time on it. The one thing I'll point out with him is that all his underlying metrics right on his career norms. So another one of these guys really not showing any, kind of any decline. Like, it could all happen at once, but I think it's a good signing for the Vikings, and I think it'll be very motivated that Green Bay let him go for a back in Josh Jacobs who's not as good. So I think you're going to get another year of Aaron Jones. Joe Mixon in Houston. Don't love it for as somebody who just wants the Texans to kind of be great. Just because I love CJ Stroud and I want to see him get in the ring with those other guys and challenge Mahomes. But he's a downgrade. Mixon's a downgrade compared to Singletary in terms of yards after contact, in terms of pretty much anything running the ball. He's a better pass catcher than Singletary. They both suck at pass blocking, so they probably won't block much. But I guess they probably are giving up on Pierce, or maybe he just didn't have it. So I still think they need like a speedier complement to Mixon. So I'm not just like penciling in Mixon in for like the full Singletary workload yet, because I think you could still see another move. But what do you think about this move?
Yeah, I think it's good for Mixon's fantasy value. Again, attaching himself to CJ Stroud can't hurt. But I agree. I don't love the move. Is there another running back that you would have preferred they sign? Like Barkley, Saquon Barkley sticks out as a guy that.
I mean, yeah,
would
literally
have been
any.
fun.
I would have liked any other back
Zach
that we
Moss.
talked about.
Zach
Yeah,
Moss
yeah,
would have
even
been
yeah. I
fun.
mean, because he would have been
Yeah.
cheaper. But yeah, I don't love it. I mean, he is the youngest of like those guys. Like it was Jones, Henry, and Mixon like remaining, and Mixon's entering his age 28 season, so he's not as old as you might think. But just like not just kind of like he's not really moving the needle for me. But his teammate T. Higgins requested a trade. He's set to play on a $21.8 million franchise tag. Potential landing spots. I think if he does get traded, Tennessee is interesting because you got Callahan, who was with Cincinnati over there. Obviously, Carolina, Chicago, Arizona would have cap room. People seem to think Houston still needs a receiver, but I mean, if you got Nico and Tank Dell, and you got Noah Brown and Woods, like I don't know that Houston is going to go after a wideout, but just any thoughts on potential landing spots for Higgins if he does get traded?
Yeah,
I think it's not going to.
Oh, I have no idea, but I think if he does get traded, I think Tennessee makes a ton of sense. Like you said, the Brian Callahan connection is obviously fit right in. Plus, the Titans still need to replace A.J. Brown. DeAndre Hopkins is still decent, but he's an aging star past his prime. So it would make sense to kind of pair Will Levis up with a younger receiver like T. Higgins and build from there. And if he does on there, it would certainly, I think it would hurt his overall upside, less touchdown equity playing with Will Levis and the Titans than Joe Burrow and the Bengals. But it could help him in PPR formats. I think maybe he'll see more targets per game. So it might depend on your format. But I think if he does get traded, Tennessee makes the most sense for both sides.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking as well. Only thing is, do they want to kind of go all in on the receivers when, like how much do they believe in Levis, I guess is the question too. Cause Callahan, it's a new regime. So a lot of questions. Calvin Ridley, another guy who, as we're recording this, we haven't seen any movement on him, but remember the Jaguars did sign our guy, Gabe Davis, to 3 years, $39 million. The reports are New England is going hard at Ridley, but he prefers to return to Jacksonville. Now Jacksonville would have to kind of perform some cap gymnastics to get it done because they've been pretty active. But if they release Zay Jones, they could probably make it work. But my question to you is, Ridley is 30 in December. He's only had 1 year higher than 1.77 yards per route in his career. Last year he was 49th of 102 qualified wideouts in yards per route, so pretty much middle of the pack. What is Calvin Ridley worth at this stage? Like, what is he a true number one? Is he like, what is he?
Yeah, probably a solid number two. Okay. He was so inconsistent last year, but there were times he was flashing some of that upside we all knew and loved from the Falcons. But we didn't know how effective he'd be because he was out for like almost 2 full seasons, right? So he was much better than I was expecting last year, but in the end, yeah, he ended up maybe being like more of a high-end wide receiver too. So yeah, I thought that the fact that they signed Gabe Davis to a pretty big deal meant that maybe Calvin Ridley's out of it. I think for his fantasy value, I think landing with the Chiefs would be ideal. And he'd be good, like Rashee Rice and Calvin Ridley would be a good 1-2 combo. I think that would make a ton of sense. And I think that would be great for Patrick Mahomes stock as well. So I'm kind of hoping that's the landing spot. But I've seen that it's potentially going to the Jags or the Patriots now. I think the Patriots, they're going to have a rookie quarterback presumably. So I think would make sense to land a guy like him. He would be the number one receiver there and have some help. But it's kind of murky right now, like where he's going to end up and what would make the most sense for him.
Yeah, he's kind of like in that like purgatory, like between like a number one and a number two. Like his best year was when he was kind of filling in for Julio as the number one, but he started as the number two. But last year, I mean, his stat line probably could have looked a lot better if he didn't drop so many balls, which he tends to regress. But he's also 30. Yeah. He's had the mental health issues, so tough one for me to cap. I guess we just got to kind of wait to see where he goes. But man, wide receiver, New England's where wide receivers go to die. So I kind of hope it's not New England. But I think Jacksonville, if they got rid of Jones and go Ridley, Davis, Kirk, like that would be pretty dope.
Yeah.
For Jacksonville. So I'm kind of hoping the Jags do that. All right, before we get out of here, I just want to get your top values and your top busts so far in free agency. Who do you think are the top value signings thus far?
Well, there's been so many, so I'm just going to pick a couple. The first is someone who is near and dear to my heart, Demarcus Robinson. 1 year, $5 million for the Rams. I thought that was an excellent signing. He came out of nowhere down the stretch last year. I just think he makes a solid wide receiver 3 behind Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. And like I said, that 1 week I was doing initial projections. I swear to God, I thought I was looking at Puka Nacua's underlying metrics. So I love that signing for him. The Rams keep that continuity going. Won me quite a bit of money in the playoffs. But I love that signing. Aaron Jones, I thought that was a good signing too by the Vikings. 1 year, $7 million. So, you mentioned he still looks pretty good at 29. Just was unable to stay healthy last year. I think that's a good move for them. 1 year is very low risk. Some of these deals like DeAndre Swift, 3 years, that's probably too much to gamble on a running back. So love the signing. Also, it's inside the same division. So it's kind of an FU to the Packers who kind of screwed them. So love that signing by the Vikings. I mean, who the hell knows who's going to be their starting quarterback? But I thought that was at least a fair deal just based on how much these running backs have been going for, and he's still an above average back.
Oh yeah, he's one of the I think he's still a top 10 back when healthy.
Oh, top 10, yeah, when healthy, yeah.
Like,
well, that's kind of what you were saying with Derrick Henry. He wouldn't really decline; he would just get injured more.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what happened last year. Aaron Jones was still really good; he just wasn't able to stay on the field.
Yeah, but the most recent Aaron Jones has been the best Aaron Jones, which so at least we have that. But I totally agree. I think Aaron Jones and Robinson both great signings. A couple I like. Zach Moss to the Bengals. I think this is how you put together a backfield on a budget. 2 years, $8 million for Zach Moss. Last year, Joe Mixon, 2.6 yards after contact. Moss. Last 2 years, sorry. 2.6 for Mixon, 2.9 for Moss. So he's been better after contact. His rate of forced missed tackles is nearly double Mixon's over the past 2 years. And Mixon would have cost more for 1 year than Moss would for 2 years. So great signing by the Bengals. You have Burrow, you have Chase, you don't need, and you have Chase Brown. So this is perfect. Perfect signing, I think, for the Bengals. And another under the radar one, I'll go defense here. Marcus Davenport to the Lions. 1 year, $6.5 million for an edge in his age 28 season that you're essentially buying low because he played 4 games last year. But before that, he had graded out in the 78th percentile or better in each of the last 4 years, never lower than 65th. So he's always been a top 20, top 30 edge rusher out of over 100 graded at PFF. So this is a perfect buy low. And if he's even 90% of what he was before the injury, which is possible at age 28, I mean, you're getting a steal at $6.5 million for a team that has eyes on a Super Bowl. So love that one for the Detroit Lions. I know they also got Carlton Davis in a trade and Amik Robertson. So they're trying to improve that defense, which is exactly what they need to do. But I really love this Davenport signing for him. Okay, and we'll get out of here with bust guys you think that are just not going to live up to their contracts.
Yeah, I mean, I like DeAndre Swift, but I just thought the 3 years, $24 million deal by the Bears just didn't make sense because they already have 2 pretty good backs in Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson. Not sure Swift moves the needle enough. And love the Aaron Jones 1 year deal for $7 million. And then kind of a funny one for me, but the Rams made kind of a weird signing with Colby Parkinson, 3 years, $22.5 million. Tyler Higbee might not be ready to start the season. It's probably unlikely he will start the season. But this is still a weird signing. I thought Davis Allen had some upside and you can lean on him until Higbee returns. And Parkinson's a good blocking tight end, but you don't need to spend up for good blocking tight end. and probably won't need him as much with 3 solid wide receivers anyway. So it was just kind of a weird signing to me to be signing Colby Parkinson to close to like $7 million a year.
Yeah, every year there's like 1 or 2 like backup tight ends that just get like starter money before they've ever shown it. Like Parkinson does have some receiving upside. He's not just a blocker. Like I think he is actually a pretty decent like dual threat. And maybe McVay is smarter than you and I, so maybe he sees something. Yeah. But yeah, no, this one was a head scratcher for me too. But I guess this means that Parkinson's probably going to start, and Higbee's probably not going to start the season, and then I guess Davis Allen will remain the back. They also got Hunter Long there too. I think he was hurt all of last year. So but the number for Parkinson, that jumped out at me too. That's a head scratcher. So we'll see how that goes. For me, it's 2 guys. It's not even close for me. 2 guys on the Arizona Cardinals who, like, first of all, like, why? But Justin Jones and Bilal Nichols. First of all, why are we signing defensive linemen from 2 of the worst defensive lines in the league? So Justin Jones got 3 years, $30 million, just under $20 million guaranteed. Now he graded out 107th of 130 interior linemen last year on 740 snaps. He's only had 1 year in his 6-year career where he graded out as a top 60 guy, which essentially is a starter. So he's just been terrible his entire career, pretty much, aside from the COVID year. And then Bilal Nichols got 3 years and $21 million with $14 million guaranteed, and he was nearly as bad as Jones last year in terms of his grade. And same thing, he's been declining for 4 straight years. Really hasn't ever, had a great season since that pandemic year as well. And you're talking about 2 interior linemen. Like why are we giving these guys $35 million guaranteed? And you're the Cardinals. Like this is a head scratcher for me. So like, I know you have all this cap space. I know you're kind of sitting pretty with all these picks, but if this is the way you're going to spend your money, then sure, I am not going to be hopeful, because like these just stand out. And I went to check, some, I like to see what other people think. And like a lot of sites are like pretty kind in general. Like everything's like an A or a B. And I definitely saw like a couple of C's when it came to some of these guys. So I'm like, all right, it's not just me. Like I really don't get the Jones and the Nichols signing. It's with all that money, just getting guys from bad interior lines and combining them and giving them a lot of money makes no sense to me. But that's going to do it for us here on the Action Network podcast, presented by BetMGM. If you like betting, go check out all of our betting content over at the Action Network podcast channel, actionnetwork.com. For all of our NFL betting and fantasy content, fantasylabs.com for our DFS tools and models. Don't forget to join the Action Network Discord server for some extra fun. I know Kerner is very active up in there, so be sure to check that out. Link is in the episode description for that. Also, the newest feature of the Action Network app, Fantasy Sync. Make sure you check that out. You can find Sean on X at @the_oddsmaker. I'm at Chris Raybon. We're at those same handles on the free award-winning Action Network app. Until next time, let's get this shmoney.